2, 3, go.
Welcome to Intelligent Think, the podcast in which we explore what makes ideas great, how we can make our thinking better, and why it's so important that we share our ideas with the world. Plus, we'll talk to thought leaders and authors about their own ideas and experiences so you can mine them for gold nuggets that will help you on your own journey. I'm Verity Craft.
And I'm Christina Wedgwood.
And this is Intelligent Think. So that's the first time you've heard that.
It is. It's very good.
Oh, yay. Okay, that's good. You're not like, oh, shit, that's not remotely what I want to talk about. Thank goodness. So thanks for joining us, everyone who is here and listening. Everyone could be two of you. Who knows? Maybe just our mums. But we have sort of become accidental podcasters because we decided, we'll film some videos of us talking, because that's what we do a lot of, and then we'll just break them down into videos for social content, and we might share the long ones as well. And everyone was like, yeah, that's a podcast, Verity. You're starting a podcast, so I guess we're starting a podcast.
We're resisting slightly though.
Yeah, we'll keep pretending that we're not really doing it in order to podcast. Yeah, exactly. But we are very excited to have you here if you are listening. And yeah, today we wanted to talk a little bit about the value of thinking partners and why thinking partners are so important. So, see, you just happened to write a book less than a year ago all about better thinking and why we need more thinking in the world. So tell me, why do you think thinking partners are important?
I think thinking partners are important because you need people around you that think differently, because as a whole, we all think differently. So we've only got experience of thinking how we think. And so it's hard to imagine other people's thought processes. Even their speed of thinking, I've noticed, is really different. So I think when you think with other people, you get other perspectives, their experiences, you see the questions, the gaps you've left, the things you haven't filled in for them. And so that kind of enhances your thinking.
I also think that, you know, if you are trying to build thought leadership, if you're trying to get your ideas out there in whatever format that's in, your audience doesn't think the same way as you too. So assuming that they're going to engage with what you put out there in the same way that you would is kind of silly.
It's why you need it rounded out, and you only can get it rounded out if you've let other people come in while you're doing the thinking.
Yeah, that's true. Like, otherwise, all it is you just kind of ruminating in your head. And I don't know about everybody else, but my head is not necessarily always the healthiest place at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Definitely not then. I think nothing good gets thought between the hours of 3 and 5. I think rational brain comes back online about then.
Well, and you're far worse than me. You're often awake at that time of day. So.
Nothing good happens at 3 though.
So I would love to chat about how we act as thinking partners for each other, because I think one of the reasons why we thought it would be good to create some content that's us talking to each other is that actually what makes our business, Intelligent Inc., by the way, we haven't actually mentioned that so far, but our business great is the fact that we do think really differently and we bring really different things to the table. And so we were like, well, maybe if we share some of that, people will see that. What do you think makes us good thinking partners? Or do you think we're good thinking partners?
I do. I had to say to someone recently that Verity and I are a case of 1 + 1 = more than 2. And I think that is because we think really differently. We are really different, but we think well together because we think differently. You have often, one of us is the accelerator and one of us is the brake. So you need both of those to drive a car. So I think that that's a good combo here as well. And so, yeah, I know the ways that it plays out between you and I. One of them is that I'll have an idea and I'll be deep in the detail of all the things and spinning my wheels. You will always just pluck the piece that is actually important or will help us go somewhere out and then go, okay, here we are. And I'm like, right, refocus there. Thank you. Because I'm just, or I think, your ideas need, you're thinking up here always. You need the scaffolding, I guess, to not fall from up there. And I think my like methodical sort of, but what about this? We haven't thought about this. Who might argue with that? All of those sort of challenges enhance, your original idea as well.
I was going to use exactly those two examples, which is that, like, I think the reason why thinking partners are so important and why you and I are important for each other is you sort of, how would I put this? Like, get rid of our worst impulses. Like, one of my strengths, which is also one of my weaknesses, is the fact that I like to think quite big and I have all these ideas and I get really excited about things, but it also means that I don't always, like, I like to jump straight into action without necessarily like thinking through how to do it the best way. And so you often will have to come in and go, okay, like, let's just slow down a little bit and think about what we're actually trying to achieve here and go into more of the detail, and vice versa too. Like, when you get caught in a problem, your biggest strength is your brain, but it's also your biggest enemy because your brain really likes to overthink. And so me coming in and being able to pull that out, and I think it's why having other people, and it doesn't have to be one person all the time, it can be different people, but having other people is so important, because otherwise you are sort of stuck in your best and worst impulses.
Yeah, it shaves the edges off that, I think, when you can allow the influence of others to move you forward. Like, you are a really take action person. That was the bit I was going to say. So I think everyone can probably guess by now I'm the handbrake in this scenario. But you will just leap to the action. Whereas I've maybe thought it through more fully sometimes. Whereas I will not take the action yet. So I'll stay in the thinking territory and just dream about it for a long time. So you push us to actually make stuff happen too.
Mm. Have there been any times where I've really annoyed you as a thinking partner?
Probably. But I think the reason that it works is the respect that we have as well. So we can challenge the idea, or we can call each other out on maybe what we've missed, or shine onto a blind spot or something, without ever feeling attacked. And I think that's a thing that we're just coming to value now in our, like, the thinking communities that we've started, is the way that we, or even in our one-on-one partnerships with clients, is that we can challenge them without, it's never an attack. It's a really gentle, supported challenge in service of improving the idea or the outcome. And I think because we're so aligned always on the purpose, the idea, the outcome, well, not necessarily the idea, but the outcome and the values and the whatever, there's alignment there. There's a lot of respect and there's a lot of kindness in that. And I think it gives us quite a lot of leeway to be challenging, or to kind of not tolerate each other's. We don't let many things slide.
The bullshit doesn't get through generally.
Yeah, we'll call each other, and we'll call things how they are.
I think that's true. And it also, like, I kind of think it speaks to a wider problem maybe that we have as society when it comes to, like, challenging ideas and challenging what people think or believe, is, like, you can only challenge somebody's thinking or their beliefs or whatever it is if they feel safe with you. And, like, that's the problem, is that we're now living in a world where, like, random strangers are telling you that you suck and that your ideas suck and that you're wrong and that what you believe is wrong. And actually, it's why personal conversations have so much more of an impact on changing people's minds, because if you've made that connection first, then it makes somebody feel a lot safer to be able to accept the fact that maybe they have changed their mind. Like, I remember one conversation where you gave me some feedback. I don't remember what it was, but it probably wasn't the most complimentary feedback in the world. And I remember at the end of it, you saying something along the lines of, I really appreciate that you always just take it on board. But I think that is because, I don't feel defensive when it comes to you or to really any of our team or clients or anything like that, because we all have created kind of this place of safety, I guess. And it just was a good reminder of, like, it's really important that you're able to take feedback, but also if you're expecting to be able to challenge someone, you first have to make them clear that they feel safe with you.
Yeah, and I think it's the it's the both in service of getting to somewhere better that I think if you can also, think about a customer service relationship, right? Where, or either as a customer or say a business that you've dealt with, if you just walk away because something wasn't right or up to your standard or your expectation wasn't met or something like that, you've done them the disservice of not giving them the nugget that they could have used to improve, or they're left going, well, I don't know what happened there, and they can't iterate or fix that. I think the greater act of respect is telling someone, even if it's hard, here's what wasn't right or whatever. I know I'm getting a little bit off topic, but it's the same theory where, if we're both trying to, it's for the greater good almost. It sounds trite, but it is. Like, we know that we've both got each other's backs, so therefore, and same with our clients, they know we've got their backs, so we are allowed some leeway on the challenge. I think.
How did that work for you when you were writing your book? Like, I already know that you have said you couldn't have written it without, some thinking partners, Dave from our team in particular. Why was having those external brains so important?
I think it's interesting actually on that front. Even the why Dave part is sort of interesting, because you want a thinking partner who's going to bring the challenge and the another perspective, or even just a few probing, well-placed questions. Have you thought of, or what about this, or how does that, track with this other thing you said? But also the thing that Dave does so artfully, which has kind of given me another lens on how I think of thinking partners now, is he doesn't insert very much of himself into the process. So you can be kind of, it's the real coach approach, I guess, that Dave takes, is you can be coached by him in your thinking and you still feel like you own all of the thoughts, as opposed to, him supplying a few and then it's snowballed into something else that maybe wasn't quite where you were coming from in the first place. So I think he was instrumental in that. And I think different personality types maybe respond differently to that too. Like, I am a person who will value often more highly someone else's thinking than my own. So I can be blown around a little bit on what others are saying or putting forward, especially if they are good communicators or compelling. And so, for me, someone with a less, strong approach was what I needed to still maintain ownership over the ideas. What else happened though that was helpful in the book? Definitely.
Well, I was going to say, if I could just jump in then, I think it was really interesting during the process of writing a book, because I didn't know what you were writing about for a really long time. And that's really unusual for us, because most of the stuff that we do is so, like, we're doing it together, we're figuring it out together. And I remember you saying at one point, like, I'm trying not to show you until I'm confident enough in my ideas that they're not, that I'm gonna feel like they're my ideas rather than our ideas. And I really respect that, because I think actually you're right, you do have a tendency to be swayed by other people, and as one of the people who can sway you, sometimes that is quite useful for me. But like, because it was your book in your name and it needed to be your thinking, not necessarily Intelligent Inc.'s thinking as a whole, I think that was a really good approach. It also, I must admit, like, there was a little bit of ego occasionally that I had to be like, oh, I'm not going to have a say in this. But I'm like, I get it. And I think that you got to a place that felt really authentic to you, which was good. And you're right, it's what Dave is really good at. But I do find that funny that, like, you were able to at least identify that, one of your tendencies is to be swayed by other people, which, you are in business with me and you're married to another one of those people. Yeah, so exactly. I can understand why you would need something different when it's something that your name is going to be on and it's not like a joint venture.
Exactly, and that was I have that same dynamic at home as what I have at work. So I kind of protected this project a little bit from that. But I think, going back to what works is with thinking partners, is that we shave off each other's, we minimize the limits of our limits. That wasn't a very good way of saying that, but, we other people complement our strengths and that sort of thing. We help us overcome our weaknesses. But I think there's a lot of self-awareness too that you need to do when you are thinking with others. You bump up against things that are uncomfortable, and then to be able to find what was going to work in that situation required, I think, really sitting with it.
Yeah. I also think it's really interesting. So one of the things that we've started exploring a lot more is kind of thinking communities. So we've got like the Better Book Project, which is our small group book coaching program. That was kind of the start of that, which was another idea that I convinced you of.
Well played.
And knew that it had to be book related if you were going to be keen on a group program. But now we just started a new one this morning. We had a call with our Intelligent Think Tank, which is literally, I've described it as a thinking community. Because we've started to realize that value of not just having one-on-one, but also that multiple perspectives. And I'm interested to know, because obviously you were working with Dave in terms of that coaching kind of relationship with your book, but how having then other perspectives made a big difference to it as well.
That was quite vulnerable because I had been in the Better Book Project as a coach, and then I was there as a participant. And some of the same other participants were in there that I had started coaching, but actually because it was this safe, trusted space, and they were, I hate using the term like-minded, they weren't like-minded, but they were all people, clever, similarly aligned people who were all there for the same purpose, which was to write a freaking great book. There was some safety, I think, in that. Con in the group also called me on my shit a couple of times.
Of course he did.
And he had again, he is a coach in his, professional life too, and his personal life, actually, a soccer coach. But he had a way of helping me see something that I was maybe doing that wasn't very helpful at one stage. So he was the one that said to me, stop procrastinating. I'm calling it that. I don't think he called it that. But he basically said, stop, don't do any more research and any more whatever. I was doing that to almost put off starting writing. He said, see, you need to trust what you know already first, and then bring in other people's research or whatever as it supports what you're saying later, or once you've framed your case. So that was a very helpful piece of advice. But I think you need people with different styles, different approaches to thinking, but also to life. And he just had a whole different lens, as did other people. Like, I talked to lots of clients or even prospects along the way of writing the book about, and as we were having conversations about thinking and thought leadership, and often their reluctance, or where is the authenticity gone, or what the resistance they had to social media, or whatever the things were, the sort of framework that I was building through writing the book could help in all of those cases. So I'd find myself going, well, I've been toying with this idea, without being too like, I'm writing a book, you can pre-order it here. I never did that, but I've been toying with this idea. Was this way in to start exploring it? And as I did that, there were little bits of feedback all the time that shaped then what it actually became.
Oh, that's one of my favorite phrases. I love saying, I'm just playing around with this idea, because it takes so much of the pressure off, something has to be perfect. And, we all know that trying to get things perfect just gets in the way. I say this sitting across from a recovering perfectionist. But I think it's really important that we, are sharing our ideas as we go. And it's one of the things, like, I think, you want to have thinking partners that you're having conversations with, but also your audience is an incredible ground to think with. I feel as though a lot of people get caught up in needing an idea to be perfect or a piece of content to be perfect before they share it. And actually, because they do that, they're missing out on all of the value that they would get if they would just share it and say something like, I'm just playing around with this idea. What are your thoughts? Or which bits speak to you, or which bits feel relevant? Because once you do that, then you can get all of this like gold back and improve what you're doing and change it. And you've probably got more feedback that shows it's actually relevant to people. And, rather than it just being something that you think is cool, it's actually something that the market thinks is cool as well.
Totally. It fueled the, people are going to want this or need this as well. Lots of those people subsequently did then go and buy the book. But, for some of them, that was 12, 18 months later. So the point was the fact that you start seeding the ideas and they're like, oh my God, yeah, I totally identify with that, or whatever, that was encouraging too. Like, you get some energy from that. You said before about ego, and I think you do have to there's a lot of ego that needs to move aside to think well with others, because you're coming, that I'm just playing with, or I'm toying with this idea, or I've been thinking about. Yes, it absolutely signals this isn't a done, finished, polished thing that I'm serving up to you. But it also takes some humility to go, and this is the bit I haven't figured out yet, and I'm still trying to, decipher this piece, or I'm still trying to connect it, but I don't know how it's going to be useful to people yet, or whatever the case is. You're admitting that there's a part of it that you don't know, or that you haven't solved or completely figured out yet, which I think is what we need more of too, instead of all just the posturing of, look at me, I'm leading in this space and I know what I'm talking about, so there.
So one of the things that we were just chatting about before was kind of having thinking partners that are different to you. And I know that we've got a client who we will be talking to in our next episode, so watch this space. But Stan, when he kicked off on his book journey, you were a little bit like, I don't think I believe a word that he's saying.
I believe some words. Some words.
So talk to me about why you reckon that, like, we need different thinking partners and people who don't necessarily agree with us.
Yeah, well, I think, again, I keep saying it's in the service of making something better. And what I respect the most about Stan is that he's putting himself out there to someone that hasn't necessarily drank all of his Kool-Aid, because he wants to create something great. So I said to him in that very first meeting, this won't always feel fun to both of us, because I'm not necessarily 100% on board with everything about, this topic and the way that you want to tell it. And he's like, I know. And so I said, so I am sometimes going to be like, no, you can't just say that. Like, you got to give it more, back it up. Like, show me the research, find me the evidence. I said, I'll push you. I'm going to push you. And he was like, I know. And, that's what I'm here for. So he wants to write something great. He could write it himself. Like, I think he is here more because of the thinking partner thing than he has writers on his staff, and they would be very capable of writing a book for him. They maybe drink more of his Kool-Aid than I do, and are on his payroll. So they have to. But yeah, I think not only do we think differently about the topic that he's writing about, which is valuable, but we also think in really different ways too. So Stan he's a great writer. He produces great content, but it's very short form. So he likes to write these, pithy one-sentence things, and they've all got line breaks, and he knows that, no amount of those strung together is going to make a book. Whereas I would describe my thinking. I am a very long form person.
You don't say, Christina.
Who like break out into a sweat trying to get something to, a 30-second clip or anything similar. So, I can't help but pull in all the other threads when I think about things and when I write things. So I think the balance of that is powerful too. Not just what we think about the topic.
But I do think like that having somebody disagree with you, not for the sake of disagreeing with you, but is a really powerful thing. Like you and I don't always agree on, I think we have very similar values, but they don't always necessarily come out even the same way, or like we don't necessarily have the same political beliefs or, things like that. And I think actually that's really important because we've gotten caught up in these little bubbles. So whether it's your business or you personally, the fact that you don't agree with someone is a good thing to do. Now, do I think that goes quite to the extent of you should always have to listen to someone if they deny your humanity or whatever it is? No. But I do think that we've sort of lost a little bit of that being able to disagree and understand each other's perspectives, even if you don't agree with it. And I think when Stan and I were first talking about him doing a book, I had the choice of who I brought on to work with him, of which of our team. And I actually went with you on purpose because he said he wanted the challenge and I was like, well, I know who doesn't really agree with you and who will make sure that you have proven every single one of your points and brought you on board then, because I think that's really important. And it's one of the things I respect about him and quite a lot of our clients actually, that they want to have somebody disagree with them or at least challenge them or play devil's advocate, so that way they can actually go, wait, am I full of shit? Or do I actually have something that's of value to say? And that's, I think, a really important piece of the puzzle.
I think we've seen how dangerous being in our own kind of echo chamber can be, by lots of the things that have happened in the world and in society and in different communities and things. So we still need to learn how to have constructive, respectful debate, and there are people that do that relatively well. There are a lot of people, though, that don't particularly. And one of the things I'm the most excited about with, having little boys at school currently is that I think they are proactively learning that much better than we did 30 years ago at school.
That's cool.
And they do that in this... I won't go on about it for ages, but they have this philosophy unit where they're kind of given this really gnarly question that doesn't even have a single answer. And then they all sort of, they have a talking stick or a something physical that they pass around so they know whose turn it is to speak, and they all get a chance. And you're not allowed to talk if you're not holding the cush ball or the whatever. I think there was a Pikachu toy at once in one of the classes, which was the Speakachu for when it was your turn. But they are being taught how to kind of defend what they think because they can put some basis to it or explanation, hear out other people, maybe take something from that and build on it. It's just this they have a really structured way that they run it, which makes it really safe and scaffolded, but it's what is missing largely from our white. I'm like, man, adults should be able to do this and many of them can't. Gotcha. So I don't know, I respect people who seek out those different opinions.
I feel like it's something I've had to unlearn because I did a lot of debating at high school. Champion debater, thank you. And I was really freaking good at it it did force me to look at things from different perspectives because you weren't always given the side of the argument that you necessarily agreed with. So I was forced to, think about something in different ways. But what I don't think it necessarily taught me, what it did teach me was how to form a cohesive argument, how to be compelling, how to influence people, all that kind of good stuff, which is great. I don't feel like it taught me particularly well how to actually get someone with an opposite view on side, because when it came to debating, I was trying to win over the other team, and I actually don't think that in the world you win by like being right. You win by like getting people to come to some kind of consensus that's actually good in whatever format that's in. So I think one of the things that I had to unlearn, which I feel like I've, I don't know if I'm always the best at yet, but I certainly am better at, is how to like not try and just put my opinion and my argument forward, but instead actually like listen to what other people are saying and see like either whether that's challenging my thinking and I, should be considering that, or at least understanding their perspective enough to then be able to explain this in a different way or get them on board or help them, help tell more of a story that's going to connect with them. And I think you're right, like that philosophy kind of approach that your boys are getting to learn is so cool, because they're kind of coming at it from there's no one right answer. You're not trying to win, you're just trying to think about things. And like, if you told me back when I was at high school or uni or something, you have to take a philosophy paper, I'd be like, this sounds like boring as hell. But now I'm like, oh, philosophy. like Mike Schur, who created The Good Place and a bunch of other amazing shows, and I love everything that he's worked on. But The Good Place, after he did that, because it's all about philosophy, wrote this book, How to Be Perfect. And I freaking love it, because it shows that actually philosophy doesn't need to be boring, but he also does it in a way that, like, it was making me think about, one of the topics that he talks about is, when somebody's done something awful, like a famous artist or, singer or whatever, when someone's done something awful, do you then stop consuming their art? Do you, like, what's the level? And kind of talked through, and it was kind of like the thing that he landed on was basically like, you just have to figure that out for yourself. Like, what's the right level for you? And I kind of liked that even then it was going, there is no one right answer for most of these things. So it's about working together and being open enough to actually figure out, well, what's the best or the better way of thinking about it that we can kind of all come to some sort of, not necessarily agreement, but understanding, I guess.
There's a piece of research too that shows, well, actually there's 2 points I want to make here, and one is, I've said this before, that we often think we're doing well when we consider like two sides of an argument or two sides of a coin, but I think it's Adam Grant that says actually, you should be considering the many like different sides of a prism, like things come through, there's very rarely just two bits to it. But the other piece of research that I think is really interesting in the talking to people with different views than you, there was this research done by I think it was Stanford, can't recall. The Difficult Conversations Lab was the little like subset that did this particular research, and they put people with very different views on really contentious issues together for half an hour. And the point was that they had to come to a consensus. So no one was trying to convince, you weren't trying to sway over to here or sway over to there. You were trying to basically sign something that showed the things that you could agree on. And they were things like, around immigration or abortion or like big topics that have really like a lot of complexity. They are definitely not two-sided topics. And the thing that absolutely changed the game was like, they had a baseline of how many people could kind of get to something in half an hour. But then they added this control and this sort of different variable, which was you had to tell the person, like you had to make your case while also describing the things that you didn't know.
Ooh.
So you put forward your argument, but then also all the uncertainty in it, the things you weren't sure about. And then how many of those people in that group who were sharing what they thought but also what they didn't know, how many of them could come to consensus? And that number was hugely, like way bigger than this group. And it was because when you admit that there are things about it that you don't know, you're pointing to the complexity, but you're also taking down a bit of the defensiveness of the other person. So they're like, oh, well, hang on, here's this person who I know is smart and is giving me this really well-reasoned argument for why their point of view is right. And they're admitting that, and I'm like, oh, I'm sitting here kind of knowing that there's things about this that I'm not 100% on either. So you then lean into that space, and that opens you up to being, I think, a little bit more, I don't know, not impressionable, but, you're just a little bit more curious about some of the things, or you start going, well, how much do I really, really know what I'm putting forward as well? You hold it a little bit more lightly, I think, when someone else is showing you that they're holding their point of view more lightly too.
God, yeah. I feel as though, like, as somebody who, because I think I am a very confident person and I come across that way, and I often will say things that I think or whatever, and people will go, oh, she must know that. And I found that it's been really powerful when I then am like, oh, I have no clue. Because often I'll just say something that's just like my first thought off. And I think you've mentioned many times the story of Logan, your husband, doing a similar thing in like pub quizzes and stuff, where he'll just say something and everyone will take it as rote because he sounds so confident. And I do the same thing, and it's not an on purpose trying to like mislead people. It's just going, oh, there's an idea that people take as true. And so it can be really, like, I found it to be a really useful tool, particularly say when I'm coaching clients or something, where I'm like, oh, I don't know this, or I'm still working on this, or we're just trying to figure it out, or, oh, I just learnt this thing new yesterday, because I think it makes people feel a lot more comfortable with admitting that they don't know stuff too, because I think otherwise my general demeanor can probably come off as a little bit intimidating sometimes, as like, oh shit, she knows exactly what she's talking about. And I'm like, no, I'm just bullshitting out of my ass most of the time.
The way you say things definitely has an impact. Like even the amount of hedging language or something you use, like, in that story, Logan would spout an answer. And I was like, do you know that? And he's like, nope. Like not ashamed or anything. There's no qualms about the fact that's what just came out. He's like, I just thought it sounded good. It's like the first thing that popped into my head. Whereas if I was to venture the same guess, which is effectively what he'd done, I would have said, what about? Or could it be? Or not just like, it's Croatia, as though that's the answer. So I think that also signals to people like that hedging language that we use makes us look less certain.
Yeah, but I like that. I think one of the things I like in your book is that you highlight that that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, that I think we've always gone, oh, well, it's far better to look really confident. And look, being confident and looking confident has been a real benefit to me. Let's be honest. It really helps me get some stuff. But it doesn't always get to the best result, because often people will just go, oh, we'll just do what Verity says, because she sounds confident. And actually often being able to hedge or to go, well, how about we consider that, then means that somebody else is more willing to put forward an idea, which then means that you might get to a better result. And that's kind of why we do what we do, right? Is we firmly believe that if more people were to put their thinking out into the world, if we were to really challenge our thinking, if we were to be more open to better ideas, then we would solve problems more effectively than feeling like, oh, I can't put my ideas forward because that person sounds really confident. And so the more that we encourage people in whatever form that is, whether that's thinking partners or hedging language or acknowledging uncertainty or any of those things, the more that we encourage people to be able to share their ideas and to then be challenged and then look for the improvements, then the more likely we are to actually get to solutions to the things that we're faced with.
And solutions that work for everybody too.
Yeah.
That are inclusive and considered and effective. So yes, you definitely invite, I think, more people to venture an opinion or think for themselves when you leave a little bit of space in, through something you don't know, or a question that you ask as well, or something that we all want to help and fill that. So yeah, I think that works.
Nice. So I feel like we've covered an awful lot today. And it definitely ties into kind of the way that we like to approach work. We help people write incredible books, and I don't think that you can help somebody write an incredible book unless you can be a thinking partner for them. Like, otherwise they could literally just go use AI or, a transcription tool or whatever, and that'll get you a fine book, but it's not going to get you an incredible book, right? You need somebody to challenge your thinking and to make that better. But I actually think that although it's what we do day to day in our business, sometimes it's harder to do personally and in life. I don't know if you find that too, but like, I find that I'm a lot more open to challenge and feedback in work than I necessarily am outside of work. I don't know if that's the case for you too.
I don't know. I do want to say though, on the writing thing that you just said, the writing great books, I heard a quote recently which is so true, and this guy was saying, I can't find good writers. Like, why is it so hard to find good writers? And someone came back to him and said, because what you're calling great writing is actually great thinking, and there's just not that many. He's like, there should be more great writers, and he's like, there are, but there's not as many great thinkers. So I think that I think that's why we get people to the very best books, is because we get their thinking really solid. But I don't know, that personal challenge, probably I'm just more self-aware at work. Yeah.
Shall I ask Logan?
I apparently don't always want feedback on some of the other things.
I'm sure Matt would say that I'm not nearly as open at home.
I do. One of the thinking pairings that I love the most, and even though I have to just go away and do something else when they get engrossed in a conversation, because I know that that's them for the next while, is actually Logan and Dave, though, because they both have enough respect for each other, but they're very different and they have very different views, and they're both okay being vocal about their very different views, but they actually both listen to each other really well. And it's this whole, they have this I'm not ever going to see it the same way that you see it, but I'm going to call this conversation a win if I've learnt one extra thing. Like, there's one thing from all the case that you're making that I can take back to plug into, my way of seeing that, then that for them is the victory. But they will do it, especially if they've drunk beer, for I remember one of our team
Christmas
things.
parties.
We just started playing a whole different game, and they just had their conversation for another about 90 minutes or something, because they went so deep into it. But they are one of my, I think, also a really great example of thinking partners, and they will sort of almost seek each other's, I know him to have an interesting perspective that will be different to mine. So I'd like to hear it.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I distinctly remember that Christmas party. I don't remember what it was that they were discussing.
I feel like it was COVID related.
It was probably COVID related. And I feel as though I started off trying to dive in, and then I was like, it's a Christmas party. I don't feel like having that level of challenge.
No.
So there you go. Maybe there's a time and place for it for some of us. I have had somebody tell me as well, that they don't always want to get into a debate. That's another thing that I've had to learn, is just because I have a different opinion to someone, I think there is also a time and place for thinking partners. Sometimes you're allowed to just sit and have fun, and you don't need to challenge everyone's thinking, and I think it's that being open to it is the other important part. It's the making somebody feel safe, but it's also remembering that you have to make sure that you both are excited to have that, which is why it's easier in a work context, right? Because when you do it on a book coaching call, you are there for that purpose. That is the reason that you're there. Whereas maybe day to day, less so. That's
yeah, we're probably less walking around looking for you know, in our normal personal lives, like, oh, I'm hoping to be called up on this thing today, like, you know, which at work we know is for our development. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if we always want to develop. You do, but you do have to be open to it. And I think there's a safety that comes from that too. Like, you know, we've spent a lot of time personally in survival mode in the last 5 years. Like, there is enough coming to not always want to add to that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good point, actually, that sometimes your brain just needs a break. So it's okay to not think all the time, we say as the people trying to promote better thinking. Yeah. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to get off your chest about thinking partners or thinking in general, or that you feel like is really valuable, anything that you've learned that would be really valuable?
Same to you. I'll just probably take longer to think of mine.
Oh God, but me asking the question means that I don't have to think about it.
No, you do. I think you can obviously have a formal or a paid relationship with someone as, you know, a thinking partner. It's funny, I guess I hope that the term's going to catch on a little bit, or that people will recognise that actually, yes, this is someone that I value the thinking of, or, you know, that I think improves my thinking, because I don't know that we necessarily acknowledge that. We've all got somebody probably in our lives, I hope. Be sad if you didn't. Like actually sad, not, oh, that's sad. But, you know, there's always a friend or a family member or something that you know, they're sounding board people often, a teacher or a something or other. So I don't know that we necessarily go and give people that label, but you don't need to call them that, but you should have some.
I feel like we've come up with that label simply because we've been saying for years, well, we sell this one thing, but actually what clients get is this other thing.
What they value.
They might buy us helping them write a book, but really what we're doing is being... And so now somebody mentioned it, and I don't know who said it, so thanks to whoever that random person was. Could have been one of our team, could have been somebody else. But when they said thinking partners, we went, oh yeah, that's what we are. And so I feel as though we've just sort of decided to start using it in the hopes that other people will recognize the value of it. But I think the other thing that I've kind of realized, and it's sort of what we've already talked about, is just the benefit of thinking out loud and having someone sometimes reflect it back to you, sometimes like point out the gaps, but actually that process of saying it out loud is the first step, and then the second step is the second person. Like, and even just thinking out loud is really useful. You know, if I'm gonna do a keynote or a speech or something, by saying it out loud, I will notice the gaps and I will notice the things that aren't working. But if I then do it in front of somebody, suddenly it's like a whole extra level of improvement.
Feedback.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they're both important pieces, and the key thing is that thinking is social. Like, I was just reading The Extended Mind, which you read before writing your book, and have found it really useful and developed some of your ideas from some of that, about how social thinking is and how our brains work better when we are doing that with other people, when we are teaching other people, learning from other people, discussing it with other people, and just the benefit of that. So yeah, just this idea of you've got to be stuck by yourself in an office at a computer or at a notebook or something. I've certainly never done my best thinking that way. So
no, we think of it as this like internal brain bound, you know, something that's happening between our ears. But actually talking is thinking too. And, you know, often drawing is thinking. Think about, you know, the brainstorming, or the like, I'm just going to try and get a diagram to illustrate this or something. You know, that's another way of thinking. And so if you're someone that thinks in lots and lots of words, hello, you know, a valuable thinking partner for you will be someone that sees things visually, or they're like, I need to get that into a diagram. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, I think we'll bring it to the end of our first episode of Intelligent Think. So thank you very much for listening. If you've listened and stuck to the end, I'm Verity Craft.
And I'm Christina Wedgwood.
Thank you to our producer, Lochana Media, and to you for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share with your friends, and give us a review, because that's what I hear on every podcast. But here's to better thinking together.
Thanks all.
Cut.